Oh boy, it is a fun time to be a Vancouver Canucks fan again, because, as we had talked about in yesterday's Jim Rutherford extension press conference video, this team is competitive, and this team has themselves a window that, if you wanted to say, is open. Yeah, it's open right now. Open for sale, open for business, and the Vancouver Canucks, as PATRIK ALLVIN so eloquently stated earlier last week, this management has kind of a responsibility. There's a duty to its players on the squad to allow them, after being successful to open up 23-24, they have a responsibility to give them the best situation possible to be as competitive as possible in a season where they're literally first overall in the entire NHL right now. So, with all of this in mind, what I wanted to do was follow some of the noise and talk about some of the names that Vancouver Canucks fans have been discussing as potential future Canucks. It's been years since we've had the opportunity to do this, because normally, when we make a video like this, oh yeah, the Canucks should go after this guy, they should go after that guy, you should trade for this guy, like, it's never really worth anything, because it's always like, hey, the Canucks suck. Like, there's no reason for them to go out there and get a guy who's in his prime or who's in the now, a good player. It's always, oh yeah, they should go after prospects. Like, if there's a prospect in the market, yeah, Canucks should get him because they suck, right? So they should get a guy that can help them out in the future. But now, oh boy, now the Vancouver Canucks have themselves a few names that could be tossed around in some sort of trade capacity. We've been talking about Jake Guentzel a few times. We can talk about that a little bit more, actually, but that's boring. That's been the conversation everybody's talking about. So what I wanted to do instead was go over a few extra names that I've been seeing Canucks fans toss out as options that I think make a lot of sense. So we're starting out with what Kevin Weekes had to say on NHL Network. Is this NHL Network? No, it's ESPN, excuse me. He had himself a hit on the show. News of the Weeks is what they called it. And on this segment, you had yourselves, of course, Kevin Weekes, the guy who's always checking in from everywhere, making his trade rumor updates, going out there and talking about 5 names that he says could be available on the NHL trade market. They are Adam Henrique of the Anaheim Ducks, Casey Mittelstadt of the Buffalo Sabres, Jacob Chychrun of the Ottawa Senators, Pat Maroon of the Minnesota Wild, and Vladimir Tarasenko of that same Ottawa Senators team. Now, we already made one video earlier, actually, talking about Vladimir Tarasenko and the idea of trading him away for Andrei Kuzmenko, and I said that actually would be a great idea. But because there was another name tossed out there in these conversations, I wanted to turn your attention to a guy in Buffalo that may or may not ruffle some feathers. Let's talk today about Casey freaking Mittelstadt. Because when it comes to Mittelstadt, this is a guy who has kind of been in a weird spot. He's an RFA at the end of the season, so you could say that there would be an opportunity to reassess and evaluate where you're going to go with this player. Let's head over onto our hockey, because there is a thread that goes out there and makes sense into why this would be a thing. The question is, why would Buffalo want to move Mittelstadt? He's just coming into his own. Seems like the type of guy they should keep around to exit the rebuild eventually. He is an RFA, and they have a ton of forwards they are going to be committing to in the next few years. I'm not saying Mittelstadt is the guy to trade, but I feel they have too much of the same type of player. They eventually have to choose which ones to build around, and honestly, younger guys like Peterka, Quinn, and Benson may be a bigger priority. And now, Mittelstadt has been one of the best players, if not the best player on the Sabres the past few years. This season, he's at 39 points in 45 games played, 12 goals, 27 assists, and his possession metrics and 5v5 primary assist metrics are always really good. Like, he's always near the top when it comes to certain advanced analytics, and for a guy that could potentially be on the move as a win-now piece, smack dab in his prime, you could debate he's entering his prime as we speak, this could be a guy that if the Vancouver Canucks really wanted to force to play left wing, it would work, because he is capable of playing that role, and just the amount of lore with Casey Mittelstadt and the Vancouver Canucks, it just seems like a match made in heaven for some sort of a writer going out there and trying to make the craziest, nuttiest sort of pairing you could make. This is because, as we had talked about, back in 2017-18, everybody was talking about Casey Mittelstadt and Elias Pettersson. We made a video talking about these two guys because they were supposed to be the number 1 and number 2 best prospects in the National Hockey League. And spoiler alert, Elias Pettersson was not number 1. In fact, we made a video just a few months ago saying, hey, this is where we're at 5 years later. Elias Pettersson is a superstar. Mittelstadt is good. Maybe he's not Pettersson level at this point in his career, but he's still pretty all right. And nowadays, if you consider that Mittelstadt could be an option, he's probably not as good as a Jake Guentzel is right now, but he also expires as an RFA rather than a UFA, so the value may actually be the same. You may get yourselves more years out of Mittelstadt, and if you're intent on re-signing the guy, you might be able to get him for cheap. Now, that is just one of the 2 names that I wanted to talk about in this video. Here's a post made on the R Canucks sub that I think is brilliant. It's made by Toy Stretcher, which is a very funny username. The return of Tyler Toffoli? I know a second-line center is at the top of our list for deadline acquisitions, but general scoring is what our target most likely is. Lindholm is the most obvious, but if we're unable to get him for a reasonable price or can't acquire anyone similar, what about a familiar winger in Toffoli? 29 points in 43 games so far, and with the Devils currently outside a wildcard spot, he could be generating a lot of interest from teams. He's 4 years older than when we initially traded for him, but he's a solid veteran who plays the right way, can be trusted by Tocchet, and immediately injects some secondary scoring. He has a history, and can maybe resurrect some chemistry with our top guys. It's always a little sour that his time here was so short, and we didn't get to re-sign the guy due to the universe and space-time continuum or whatever. But he's still on a great expiring deal that our management can try to make work. He's making $4.25 million. Also, he would cost a hell of a lot less than Guentzel. At least this time, it wouldn't be such an issue if we can't re-sign him, depending on the price, of course. Almost surprised that there isn't as much talk about him. And a lot of these comments are like, yeah, you know what? I like it. It's an idea. I'd go with it. I was pissed off when Jim Benning let him walk. We could try to make amends. There's another comment that goes out there and says, actually the contrary, he's a shooter like Besser on the slow side as well. I was hoping Ilya Mikheyev could drive some offense, but he's fallen off the map in that department. I'm on the fence if he's enough to help second-line scoring, to be honest. They've been the weakest out of all 4 forward lines. Now there's another conversation as to why the Devils would want to do this, and long story short, because they're not really in the best position to compete right now, and I say that knowing that they have really good talented pieces, it's just Jack Hughes is still out. They're just on the outside of the wild card looking in, and no Hughes, no problem, right? Just kidding. Things are getting a little bit tough in New Jersey, and if you have yourselves a position where you're starting to slowly fall out of that spot, once deadline time comes around and you're not too confident that you're actually going to be able to play in the playoffs, then you might have to start thinking about selling out some of your guys. Tyler Toffoli does expire at the end of this season, making $4.25 million, and he's been good enough with 73 points in 82 games last year and on pace for 56 points this year that if you wanted to say this could be a valuable Canucks addition, I honestly wouldn't disagree. Like, if you tried to map everything out, okay, if you put him with Pettersson, try to reignite the same chemistry that you had 4 years ago in the bubble and in the regular season, and then you have yourselves that second line, you put JT Miller, Brock Besser, and let's just say whomever else, then you have a top 6 of, let's say, Pettersson, Toffoli, Mikheyev, Miller, Besser, and whoever else. If you wanted to toss Kuzmenko over there, or if you assume Kuzmenko was going to get traded for Toffoli, then okay, let's put Sam Lafferty back in there. Like, there would be a lot more versatility, I feel, in having these guys separated, but of course, I get it, the Lotto line is really good, so it's kind of difficult thinking about making that kind of a swap. But even if you put the Lotto line together and you wanted to put Toffoli with, let's say, a Suter and a Mikheyev or whatever, I'd say that Toffoli plays a lot more of a well-rounded game that's more applicable to Tocchet's style than Kuzmenko, and even though he does lack foot speed, he's always made up for it with really smart positioning and two-way play. Like, Toffoli's a super underrated player, I feel. And if you wanted to talk about goal-scoring ability, he's got that in spades. Also, he could fit in on that first power play unit really well with that Pettersson, Besser, Miller, Hughes quartet. It's worked in the past, and they're all better players now. So Is it not a good idea? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. This video was made really just for the craps and giggles because I found that these conversations were riveting. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the Canucks going after two names in Mittelstadt or Toffoli? What do you think the price is going to be on these guys? And do you think they should try to make it work? Thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.